On today's podcast, I'm joined by Simon King, a man who's built, scaled, sold, and reinvented businesses across the estate agency world for decades. From founding one of the UK's largest independent networks to reshaping traditional models, this is a masterclass in evolution, risk, and longevity. Hope you enjoy the podcast. If you're an estate agent that wants to stay ahead of the competition and to make more profits, then you need to talk to Iceberg Digital. Iceberg doesn't just sit alongside your CRM system, it replaces it. It's the UK's leading AI operating CRM system for estate agents, combining your CRM system, prospecting, marketing, website, and compliance all in one ecosystem. Your CRM system becomes fully automated, taking care of those repetitive tasks your team shouldn't be doing. Your prospecting runs 24/7, scanning the portals, capturing property addresses, matching them with your database, and sending them personal outreach faster than any human ever could. Your marketing is automatically written to match your tone of voice. Blogs, property descriptions, vendor updates, all done for you. And your website becomes AI driven, adapting to each visitor in real time and making your agency discoverable on Google and also on tools like ChatGPT. Agents across the UK are already using Iceberg to run a leaner, smarter, and more profitable business. Visit icebergdigital.co.uk and mention the Estate and Consultancy podcast when you book your demo to get an exclusive perk. Simon King, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for coming on.
Great to be here. Thank you for having me.
So you've had a long history in and around the property industry. So we were just talking about it before we actually press record today. I was looking through your LinkedIn profile a while ago, and it's like a who's who and what's what with regards to the property world. So let's take us right back to kind of square one. How did this sort of journey begin in this sphere?
So the truth was that I got into a estate agency completely by accident. Um, I was actually in car sales. I started. That was the start of my career. I was one of those kids that at school, I thought there must be something else out there for me to go for. And typical for sales, I went away. I had a summer break. Came up for my summer holiday. My mum gave me an advert for a job and said, "I really think you should get a job." And I applied for it and got it. And that was how I started my career. In the meantime, my brother was actually an estate agent. And he worked for a company called Ekins, which has got a fantastic history in estate agency. You can trace a lot of the estate agency back to that little company here in Cambridgeshire. And so that's how I got my introduction to estate agencies, actually through my brother being in an estate agency. And then he needed somebody to do viewings for him. And that someone turned out to be me. So there I was doing my daytime job and moonlighting as an estate agent. So it was completely by fluke, by accident. I got the phone call one day to say, "Look, can you go do a viewing?" I said, "What's the viewing?" "Well, I'll give you some keys. Go and show someone around a house." "Okay, then what?" "Oh, you'll be okay. Just make it up." Um, and literally, that was my introduction. So that for I've always been around estate agency really throughout my since I was a teen, and been involved in it, but always, believe it or not, on peripheral. That's probably as deep as I actually got. Um, my experience with doing motor manufacturers, I had a really, really exciting time there. If you looked at my LinkedIn profile, you probably see the throwback into the Audi days. Some really, really interesting stuff there, which was really influential on me as a person, um, to go back to that point in time. And of course, eventually found myself back in the state agency world in the early 2000s, which was the birth of Move With Us and what we did within that business, which is quite an exciting adventure in its own right. Um, and that company was invented in a cupboard under the stairs at an estate agent. So there you go, back to the point.
I think I remember Move With Us because I remember when I was an estate agent back in the 2000s sort of direction. I think I might have even won a competition. So there you go. So I remember having a novelty check on my desk for quite a long period of time that was from Move With Us for winning a competition for most referrals. And that was, so talk people through what Move With Us did, because effectively I always dealt with it as almost like a part exchange medium, sort of in the middle between you and developers and bits and bits. So what was the concept there?
So it was sheer madness. Okay. So we actually started the journey with a simple principle. So, I'm one of three brothers, and each of us bring a different skill to the party. One of us, believe it or not, is a chartered accountant. So you couldn't be more different from the rest of us. In fact, we do wonder sometimes, it's true. And it's but I say my elder brother was the estate agent part. I came from a very heavy sales background, but very much brand driven and very much about cross selling products. The one thing we had in common was our grandfather, who owned a corner shop. And the interesting principle was that that corner shop was based around the simple principle that anybody that walked through the door bought something. Because even, 50, 60 years ago, it was expensive to have a shop. And you couldn't afford to have people just wander in and not buy things. And then you'd look at an estate agency business, you go, well, this is madness. We spend all this money attracting people to come in. Some of them might list a property with us. We attract all these buyers in, and some of those might actually buy a house through us. But the vast majority of people we speak to, we never transact with. Surely there's got to be an alternative. And we went through the whole, all the different variations of what that could look like. So, could that be the tech solution? Could there be a way of using software, CRM systems in a state agency to recognize opportunity and then offer that to other people to be able to do something with? When we came, there's a great, going back in time, there's this great thing called Project Ace, which was exactly that. The truth was, we're talking 1998. You know, the world wasn't ready for it, and the technology certainly didn't exist. And so then eventually what we did is we became a network of independent estate agents. So that was moving us to these routes. Um, it was a counterfoil to then the fast growth of the corporate agency groups. So we have William H. Brown been snapped up and turned into the larger Connells Group. We had the formation of Countrywide, all from the implosion of all those um, companies that were bought by the lenders back in the late 80s and 90s. So we had that implode, the creation of the corporate estate agency, and suddenly high street agents are sitting there going, well, I've got one office and the guy next door is part of a group that's got 300. How do I feel better? How do I pitch to vendors? So we created that network that single office could be part of so that they had a fighting chance against the competitor next door. Originally, we were called Partners in Property. So the really old people watching this today might remember that stage of our lives. Partners in Property became Move With Us, as the name that is probably more synonymous today, and it still exists today. They're still trading to this day. Um, and but the principle was always the same thing, which is customers want to transact in estate agencies' offices, but are we offering the services they actually want to buy? Are we capitalizing actually on these people that we're attracting into the business and actually turn them into revenue for our business? And our business being the estate agent's office. The fact that thus made money out of it was only because actually we're capitalizing on this gap between what the agent was doing and what the customer actually wanted to do. So that was the base of business. Probably the first service we ever offered was vendor referral. And that was really simple. That was out of area vendor. So applicant walks in, wants to buy a house in your town, right? Let's say I don't know where you are. Let's say it's St Albans. They're from Cambridge, and they're probably the least valuable applicant that's just walked to the door. Who's going? You're not on the market. You haven't sold. You can't buy anything, and your listing's 50 miles away. So what do I want to talk to you for, right? But of course, the agent in Cambridge, they're very valuable because they're a vendor. So we created the network to do the vendor referral amongst the out of area vendor referral amongst the different members. And we became pretty good at it. Yeah. Now, it wasn't original. We stole the idea from PHH, which later became RAND. So sorry, Simon. But that's what we did. But then we had a problem. We couldn't generate enough instructions. So we had to find a way of getting more instructions into those agents' offices. So we went to the developers and said, well, look, you've got these part exchange properties. What are you doing with them? Why don't we get involved within that? If you're having a problem disposing them yourselves, why don't we get involved in that? And we use our network of agents to dispose them for you, to sell them off. And it worked. They liked it. And that's how we built the asset management business within Move With Us, was actually from the vendor referral business, span out into development part exchange. That then span out into, we had the economic downturn. We'd already, at that point in time, developed an asset management division within the business. So we span that into asset management. So suddenly vendor referral had gone into part of exchange. And now was asset management, dealing with repossessions. No, in fact, I think it's 2019. No, sorry, 2009, shows how long ago it was now. 13.5% of all the repossessions in the country went through and with us.
Wow.
And we created that literally within 2 years. It was just answering the demand and feeding those instructions back into the agents, the network agents we had, and stepping out of the kind of the box of we're an estate agent into, well, no, we've got customers across all these different sectors, be they corporate sectors, with developers and banks, be they consumers that walk to the front door. How do we get all these different parts to work together? And that's the very, very principle of it. It turned into and still is an incredibly successful business dealing with part exchange asset management and assisted move products. So that's that part of it. But of course, it wasn't the only product that we developed and sold through there. We did loads and loads of different things. We made loads of mistakes. But the truth is, in business, if you're not willing to take a risk and learn from the mistakes when they don't go right, you can't develop moving forward. So we openly took the risks time and time and time again. Uh, yes, we were right at the forefront of hips. Do you remember those?
Yep, 100%. I remember literally I was speaking to someone yesterday about that actually, who they were talking about how they quit their job to become a HIPS assessor, and then literally got cancelled the next day. And I said, I remember that day, phoning those people saying, remember that HIPS pack you bought yesterday, 500 quid, throw it in the bin, not needed at all.
We invested millions,
Mm. Ouch.
and literally the plug was pulled, and that was the end of it.
Yep.
And we were working with some incredible companies. It was a big hit to take at the time, but what it taught us is how consumer behavior works. And later on, it became invaluable to what we were able to do later on. Um, so yeah, we did probably everything to that business in that period of time. It was incredibly exciting, Chris, because we were creating stuff that just hadn't really been done before, and certainly not done the way we did it. Um, the digital transformation, using data to drive decision making. Things we're talking in the early noughties, which just didn't really exist anywhere else. And it was bringing all those different elements together that really drove the success of that business. But at its heart, it was a network of independent estate agents. It always was. At its peak, it's smaller now because of the company obviously was sold in 2014. But at its peak, it was a network of 1,400 independent estate agents. It's the biggest in the country. It's biggest ever seen.
Mm.
Yeah. So that's where we got to. But it's obviously when we sold 2014 and things changed, then it changed. Biggest, probably one of the most things that had the biggest sort of impact on me was actually the legal side of what we did through conveyancing services. So that was invented. Literally, we had a guy called Gary with two R's, who sat on a desk, and that was our conveyancing department. That's how we started, and worked with a couple of estate agents in Warwickshire. That was the conveyancing department. It became, and probably still is, the biggest conveyancing panel manager in the country and owns conveyancing companies. In fact, it's now called the biggest conveyancing group. So to see it go from Gary on a desk with a pen and a few bits of paper to where we are, where it became, was incredible. And it was in quite a short period of time. Again, at its peak, it was doing about 70,000 conveyance instructions a year. So
I think
it was this great, great journey.
a great jet. I would lose that. Well, I was having a chat with a new client who's just started working with myself, who's a retired professional footballer of all things, and so very new to the estate agency world. It's very funny listening to what you're saying about move fast, break things, get it wrong, sort of thing, as quick as you possibly can do, and kind of you work out that winning formula just by giving it a go. And literally, it was the exact conversation I had with the today. I was like, look, mate, you're gonna suck to start off with. Like, your videos are gonna suck, your content's gonna suck, your evaluation skills are gonna suck, your door knocking's gonna suck, your Leicester probably gonna suck as well. Everything's going to suck. So your job is to get through that as quick as you possibly can do. So you can look back in 2 months' time and go, God, at least I'm not that guy anymore. At least I'm better than that. I found out what works. I found out what doesn't work in the quickest possible time I can do. And that's where that sort of, that quick moving advantage, that sort of what hits, what's a miss, and now let's move on from there.
Yeah, totally. So one one of the statements we used was fail fast. Yeah. if it's going to fail, fail it fast, and you know, and get on and move away from it. But during the fail fast process, you'll get the ones that don't fail, and there'll be things that we discover that, and also being ready to let go of things. So we developed brands and services that were incredibly successful for a number of years, that were right for that period of time, but they had a sell by date. And when they reached the end of that sell by date, we had to be ready to let go of it. Yeah. One of it's a real challenge, particularly when I know when you own your own business. Yeah. You of understanding that you're only a caretaker, really. You know, a real business, you have to be ready to get for somebody else to take it on, or actually that bit of it, you have to be ready to prune it back when it needs pruning back, and help it develop when it needs develop.
Mhm. I'm reading a book at the moment called How to Grow Rich by Felix, can't remember his surname. Basically, he's a big publishing guy, and he's obviously had loads of magazines that have been a big hit, and everything from Maxim to FHM and all those bits and pieces. Multi millionaire sort of thing. And I literally listened to the chapter yesterday about him culling businesses, and he's like, if it's not working, you know it's not working. You're only kidding yourself if you don't get rid of it quickly. So like, be emotionless about it and go, if it's not working, cut it, kill it, get on with it, move on with your life sort of thing. And don't do that thing where you're like, oh, well, maybe it'll turn itself around by Wednesday. Maybe if I just start doing this, it will be better. And I think for me, that's the big learning curve I have in business myself is that it's almost the same thing with people as well, which I know sounds a bit cold and a bit callous, but I've kind of shot myself on the foot so many times by going, oh, they can get better. Maybe they'll check. They turned up on time twice this week. That's better than last week. And oh, they didn't leave, didn't disappear for 2 hours today. There's only 1 hour. So that's not too bad. Like you kind of see the glass half full when if you looked at it from the cold light of day, you're like, yeah, it's just not working.
It, and that's so important, but actually daring to allow it not to work as well. Yeah, you know, you have to take a degree of calculated risk. And you know, it'd be right to say we didn't move with us. Sometimes there were calculated risks that paid off. Sometimes there were calculated risks that didn't. Sometimes there are non-calculated risks that we just did and they paid off. You know, because the gut was it was the right thing to do. There's a really one of the really interesting things is on the board of Move with Us were it was mainly estate agents, right? So it really was an estate agency driven business. Um, and I want to reflect back to the right at the beginning. I mentioned a company called Eakins Dillian and Handley, they're called. And they're an estate agency group based in the town not far from where I live today. Um, why would why are they irrelevant? Well, they did something incredible in the late 1970s when we were in the middle of that sticky economy at that point in time. You know, they were an agency that was in trouble. There were multiple offices, um, and they didn't know where to go next. And they did something absolutely crazy. They closed for a week to train the staff and bought a trainer from America over to train everybody.
Mm.
Now we're talking over 45 years ago.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. They, and because what they saw is it's so important to be out the blocks before anybody else
Yeah.
and to be better than anybody else when you are.
Mm.
Yeah, the market was poor at that point in time. They had to do the best they could with with what the market was giving them, right?
Mm.
But as soon as it turned, they had to be ready. Now, roll forward 25 years, and that training had a profound impact on Move With Us. It was still it's still within that. Two parts. One was the principle that you have to be ready to change because the moment it changes, you've got to take advantage of it. Yeah, it's no good to just keep cutting when times are hard. Actually, that's a great time if you can to invest in the staff, invest in the people, and be ready to take advantage of when it comes. And actually, think about it. We've just been through that because it wasn't that November and December.
Mhm.
Yeah, look at how the market is now. People are first at the blocks in January and February. They're the ones that are taking market. Yeah.
Love that.
Number two was this, and it was brilliant, and it was so simple. So this guy was called Joe Clark, and if you have a chance, Google him because it's mad. The guy was an estate agent in America in the 60s and 70s. You go, well, what's that relevant to today? Well, the thing that hasn't changed, amongst everything else, of course, is that humans, we're still the same, right? We just do not evolve that fast. We're not that different to how we were probably about half a millennia ago, really. We're still sacks of emotion and skin and bone, right? And if you imagine throughout that week's training, Joe Clark wore a card around his neck. The card was turned round, a piece of yellow card on a piece of string around his neck. I wasn't there, but the people around in the boardroom were there. Yeah. And for the whole week, he wore this card and it was just blank. And he went to the whole training session with these guys for every single person within that business, from the administrators all the way through to the directors, everybody, and never revealed what was on the card. And at the end of it, he said to them, "Okay, tell me what's written on the card." And of course, they couldn't.
Mhm.
But when he turned it, they knew exactly what it meant because of what he'd done. And he said, "Make me feel important."
I like that. Now that is timeless advice for anybody you deal with.
So simple. I'm gonna cough now, like Leo Run. Um, it's so simple, isn't it? Make me feel important. So make the people you deal with, whether they're peers in the business, whether whoever they are, make them feel good, make them feel important. And that was carried into what we did with us. That if you cut, that was part of the DNA. It was a DNA strand. So through Joe Clock, through Move With Us, um, and I can count numerous companies that were sprang out of that company called Egan Sealing and Handley. No, Move With Us was just one. There were lots of other ones
Mm.
that all carried exactly the same DNA. So, for example, Thomas Morris, estate agents. I don't know if you've ever come across them. Yeah, well respected. Guess where that comes from?
Got it.
Um, if you look at Julian O'Dell,
Yep.
Julian today, I think, still does use that
Yep.
because it's still relevant.
Timeless. Yeah.
I don't think he was there in the original session because he's not that much older than me, right? But it carried through those businesses. It's timeless and it's so important. And it was definitely something that we applied then, and it had a profound effect on me because it helped me understand, right? We all think we're great. We all think we're fantastic, but actually, it's the people that we interact with that are important.
I like that. So you sold off or walked away from Move With Us in 2014, did you say? Well,
Stalled in 2014. I stayed until 2017 because of, it was that transition period. Um, then I joined John Cook for another really exciting journey, which was the formation of what became the Nurture Group. Um, so, little known fact, uh, one of the other things that happened in this little town of St Ives in Cambridgeshire was Move With Us, was this Eakins thing and everything else, was another little business called Guild. So the Guild of Property Professionals was actually born in the same squash club at the same bar as Move With Us.
shows you how business is done in St. Ives. If you're not that far, that's
It's
what.
just that it was that crazy. I mean, we're going back a long time, but yeah, the Malcolm Lindley created the Guild. He did a fantastic job. Um, and it was a great bit. It still is a very, very great business. If you look at the guy that's at the helm today, Ian McKenzie, is a fantastic operator. So I've got a lot of time, a lot of respect for the business. And it's quite funny because if you think about it, we were competitors. Yeah. Because we were both networks, both doing our own thing, but we went in very, very different directions. We went very much around the business network. Guild and Fine and Country went very much around the brand network. So although we were competitors, we weren't really. And it was incredibly exciting to be involved in that early stage of the journey when Guild and Fine and Country was sold, and they were going through what really Move With Us experience in 2014, in 2018. So
But to show you now, to show you how shallow the gene pool is in a state agency, my first boss in a state agency was Ian McKenzie. So he was my boss. He was my boss for the first 5 years from 17 until I was 22, 23. Ian was my first boss in the state agency. So he's the one to blame for all of this.
yeah, I've known Ian for decades because his company back then
First job. Yep.
what exactly was part of Move With Us.
Yep.
So there's it's really interesting how we tend to gravitate around each other, isn't it, over all that time. Um, So that was it. Suddenly I found myself moving from Move With Us into Guild Fine and Country, which is part of the Nurture Group, which at the time was called eProp, and working with another guy who went on to do something really exciting, Adam Day.
Hey, well, there we go. Yes, never heard of him.
So Adam was at the time he was heading up Easy Property. So we worked quite closely at that point in time. Phenomenal guy. You know, it really, really, really is a great operator. And I'm so proud for him of what he's achieved from that. What was interesting is that our hot topic at the time was guess what?
Okay. I dare not have a stab in the dark on this one.
Subway scenes.
Oh, there we go. So if he knew.
So that was exciting. Finished there. It was just a year there. So it was 2018, 2019. I joined Josh Rayner and helped him with his business for a period of time. A lot of fun. Very exciting did some restructuring around it. Russell Jervis joined. It was really, really exciting ride. In the middle of that, of course, I worked with a guy that you may know called Leo Bryan.
Oh, yeah.
I might know him. So Lee and David had created a fantastic savings business in David Lee. Yeah. The challenge was that it was a classic high street estate into business. Reasonable lettings book, decent amount of sales, but already taken a really brave move to centralize everything an offsite. So they'd moved from being high street offices into being single head office, which was a brave move then. We're talking like, 2019 here. And we got talking about, well, actually, what do you want to do next to the business? Because they worked bloody hard to build an estate agency business with a reasonable letting book, but of course, they don't have a great deal of value, sales businesses. So it was a real challenge to them because they'd put their life and soul in this, and they'd done brilliantly, done really, really well. But if you look at the numbers, you got to go, it's not a great return for all that for 18 years. So we did something crazy, untried, never done before. And we said, okay, let's build a self-employed agency model. Let's go and do that. And you could see where the inspiration came from because one of the things that I worked with Josh on was actually a self-employed recruiter model and then a reigning personnel. So we developed that together. We then flicked that into a self-employed agency model, put that back to David Lee, and the guys didn't do too bad, did they?
They're doing very well. I saw pure Lee skiing the other day, so he's not doing too bad.
And what was exciting is that the very purpose was to create an exit for those guys and create the next stage of their lives because they'd done the agency bit. And we set ourselves we did some crazy things actually, Chris, right? Number one, it'd never been proven before. Okay. You could take a high street agency brand and then turn it into a self-employed network. Number two, we launched the second person to join David Lee as a self-employed estate agent in an area where there was absolutely zero awareness of the brand. They were in Hertfordshire. The next person that came on was in Warwickshire.
Wow.
Okay. So the brand stretch was huge, but we took the risk and it worked. It paid off because we proved that actually the own brand, the personal brand, was very, very, very powerful. You just needed the reassurance, the secondary brand, to why they could do what they could do.
Yep.
Yeah. I love you because you're Chris, and I can trust you can do because you're part of this agency network.
Yep.
Yeah. Which you think about it is actually almost the Move With Us thing again.
Exactly. Yeah. Full circle.
Why could he do this? Is because he's backed by this. And that is exactly what the principle was through that business. And we developed that into, of course, I think it's 22, 23 self-employed agents working within David Lee, which we then sold exactly 3 years later, exactly as we planned, to IAD. And that's how I get network today.
And where he is today. And how did your progression go after that? Because obviously you've now back into the recruitment world eventually. So how did that all
Well,
come through?
so some of it. So I've always had, I when I left the kind of Move With Us world, I turned into a consultancy world. Okay. So I work with lots of different companies. I have done ever since. One of them is recruitment around particularly legal and business to business. So Rubicon recruitment is very much around sourcing conveyances, skilled conveyances, conveyancing businesses, because I've had a lot of experience in that arena. We also specialize in securing talent for selling to B2B. So people that want to put product into a state agency, we help find those people as well. Probably because, hey, I've been doing it myself for 20, God knows how many years,
Yeah.
too many to remember. Well, yeah, 26 years, something like that. So there's you can imagine that we do know what we're talking about. We do know the people. We do understand what you've got to go through. And of course, I've worked with other agents in helping them develop their businesses, whether they want to move into self-employed models or whether they want to flex into doing different things, and other uh, legal businesses, legal practices. So, be it conveyancing businesses, now they're really interesting places to be right now. I bet they get a real grip about what's going on there. Yeah, because it's not how you'd imagine it to be if you're an estate agent. It's a really interesting place to sit on the board of an estate agency business, which is obviously I do today, and also be a NED with conveyancing businesses and understand what's going on with those businesses as well.
So go on then. I have to ask you now, like lift the lid. What is, because obviously every estate agent listening in is going, bloody conveyancers, 6 months, and they're overworked and underpaid and whatever it may be and overstretched. Uh, not even returning my phone calls, whatever else. What is really happening under the lid of conveyancers at the moment then?
So the long and the short is that it's a profession that's under pressure from multiple directions. And we have to understand that. So number one, there isn't one conveyancing model. Not every conveyancer works in the same model as each other. There are different models that sit outside there. So, for example, some of the larger scale conveyancers don't actually process the work in the UK. They might do it in Mumbai. They might do it in Sri Lanka. So actually, they've broken the conveyancing process themselves to gain efficiency and reduce cost. Generally, the people that are charging less money to do the work are able to do that because they have less skilled people doing the work all the way through the process, and they just inject skilled people when they need to.
Sure.
Yeah. Um, so there's nothing wrong with offshoring. You just have to be aware of it and make people aware of it. Yeah. So literally thousands of files every month, thousands of sales and purchases every month are actually being processed in Mumbai and in India and in Sri Lanka. Yeah. Therefore, you'll understand that that's going to create for those files a communication issue because, of course, the people that are working on those are literally on a production line. So they're only really dealing with this piece they're working with right now, which is fine because if you look at the timescales, generally they aren't any different from most other files. But if you want good communication, then it becomes a challenge. Yeah, that's one model. Another model may be high street solicitor. High street solicitor model is different again because the high street solicitor is generally multi-practice. So they'll be doing a conveyance of a property, but they may also be doing court work. So therefore, the way that they work will be different, completely different from the people that outsource to other countries for the processing. And then somewhere in the middle, you have people that will be running teams. So you have one conveyancer, and around the edge of them, you'll have multiple staff to support them. They'll have a high file count. So they're probably running with a very, very large amount of transactions that they're dealing with over this team of people. And then lastly, you'll have people that will be, the conveyancer will be there end to end. So you have a fully skilled person, fully qualified, with experience that will deal with it from the point of being handed the file right through to exchange. Yeah, and then completion.
But I guess that's the most expensive out of the lot. That sounds like the most expensive option out there is the, one qualified person from start to finish, whereas probably the cheapest, I guess, is sort of offshoring it to wherever it may be in the world. And I guess obviously but obviously the trade off is obviously service goes down as your price goes down as well.
That is exactly what happens. So we don't have like a well, when we talk conveyancing, let's talk about, well, just like estate agency, not all estate agents are the same. They don't even all operate in the same way. Neither does conveyancing. I mean, even interestingly, there are two. It's actually governed by two different bodies. So you have solicitors and you have licensed conveyancers. Yeah. Now you'd argue, well, surely the solicitor is better than a licensed conveyancer. Well, the solicitors are more to practice, and the licensed conveyancer is specialised in property conveyance.
Got it.
That's the difference. So if you were going to buy and sell a house, you choose which one you want. Yeah. If you're an agent, you're going to recommend somebody, then I would recommend, first of all, understand what you're really recommending. What are you really putting forward to your customers? Because that's ultimately your name. Yeah. So that's the first part is really get is understand that the market isn't about there isn't a single conveyance market and a single process. Actually, there are lots and lots of different processes. It is a fractured um, profession because number one, what's the job of a conveyancer? Is to represent the buyer or the seller. Actually, it isn't quite that because if you're dealing with a buyer, you're also representing the lender. So therefore, you now have a responsibility not only to the buyer and the seller, but also the lender. Quite often that gets missed.
Mm,
Yeah. So therefore, the lender now has an influence on what really happens within that transaction because legally the conveyancer is acting on their behalf.
I see.
Yeah.
Got it.
You run into, well, what else we run into? Why do things take so long? Mm, Well, a lot of it is because honestly, the compliance today is so much greater than it was 15, 20 years ago when we're doing transactions then. The amount of detail that we go into today is so much greater than it was then that a lot of it is dealing with mistakes made years ago because you have to write them. Yeah. Um, the amount of times I've seen a new home sold 15 years ago. Yeah. Fantastic. Comes to the conveyancer. The wrong garage is actually registered to it.
If- Yeah.
So I actually saw one where two homes, two garages beside each other. But they've been registered, they transposed the garages. Okay. And one of the homeowners had converted the garage into accommodation.
Ah, ouch.
So actually, you haven't actually got saleable property
Mm.
at that point. Certainly not mortgageable.
No, quite. That's a tough one, Paul, isn't it? That's a tough situation to look at that land registry form in that situation because it's funny, isn't it? Because you think automatically with the way of the world and with digitization, all these things, you think to yourself, things that should get cheaper in the world are electronic devices. Flat screen TVs get cheaper over time, sort of thing. And you think to yourself, everything should get quicker. I don't have to go to Blockbuster Video anymore. I go knock on my TV, go on Netflix, and I can have the whole world of cinema in front of me. And it's always funny when you look at the stats for conveyancing and it's like, oh, over it used to be, the average used to be 4 months and now 2 years later is now 6 months. And you're like, hang on, it should be going the other way with digitalization. But yeah, so it's such a strange metric.
Yeah, it's a combination of we've never had as many leasehold properties as we have now, or properties with management companies involved, because there have been so many new developments where the land's not been adopted by the local council. Yeah, so that's a change. Um, AML is the compliance around that has changed so much within the legal process, particularly around now source of funds, as in identifying where the funds came from in the first place. It's not good enough to give 3 months bank statements and say the cash is there. No, where did that cash come from? You have to identify it. And all the way through that process, it is dragged out. And at the same time, we have nearly a third less people doing companies doing conveyancing today than there were 15 years ago, and less people doing it.
Mm.
So that's why it's getting tough.
But you've been very valuable with your time today and very generous with your time, to say the least. Quick last question for you. The future of estate agency, where do you see estate agency? If you could get in your crystal ball out or get in your time machine, get in your DeLorean, whatever it may be, and you were going to jump X amount of years in the future, what do you hope to see down the line?
Um, I hope to see I believe, honestly, I believe that we are already in the future. We're already seeing it, which is that we'll have, agents working in multiple ways, whether it be high street, whether it be self-employed, whether it be brokers, however, yeah, that'll exist. That'll go through all that period of time. Um, I believe there'll always be a need for humans to deal with humans, particularly with the emotional process of buying or selling a home. Yeah, so I absolutely believe in in the state agency, and I believe that what we have today is essentially right. Okay, we might bring in further qualification into it, but the key part is it'll always be a human industry dealing with people.
Amazing. Simon, thank you so much for your time today. You've been very generous with it. Thank you so much.
Absolute pleasure.